Welcome to Essential Therapies podcast. Dr. Cindy here. I'm a physical therapist and exercise physiologist, and I specialize in the John Barnes Myofascial Release Approach. And I'm super excited to have two amazing colleagues here with me today, who we all just met recently in sunny, almost Sedona in Arizona, to repeat a course that we have all taken before called Myofascial Unwinding. And although there's been, new emphasis on fascia, it seems, over the recent years, and just very new talk about unwinding, but you're hearing all kinds of things. So we thought that we would get together and share some of our experiences where we were able to just recently really bask in the wonder and power of myofascial unwinding taught the John Barnes way. So I would like to introduce my colleagues here. Rachele, let's start with you. Introduce yourself and tell us how you got to John Barnes Myofascial Release.
Sure. Thank you for having me here. And I really appreciate talking to you guys. My name is Rachele DeCrescenzo. I'm a physical therapist in New Jersey. And I've been a PT for about 20 years. And I started taking John Barnes classes in 2017. And just would get John's brochures and always very intrigued by the brochure, wanting to take the class, but put it off for a very long time. And when I took the first class, which was Myofascial 1 in New York City, John was there, he was teaching, and I didn't expect him to be there. I didn't know, I had no idea. I didn't know he was still teaching, but he was there. It was amazing to be with him. And, I sat in that 3-day seminar, and day one, like a couple hours in, I was like, wow, this is what's missing from what I do. This is the missing piece for sure. And I just was so intrigued and just have been taking classes ever since. I get to as many classes every year as I possibly can. And then in 2019, the very, very end of 2019, I opened my own practice, left traditional physical therapy, and opened my own practice to focus on John's work. And so I have a private practice in Clinton, New Jersey, and that is all I do is John Barnes Myofascial Release. And of course, my PT brain is always working in the background, but the main focus of my practice is MFR. And it's been life-changing, professionally, personally. This work is amazing. I absolutely love everything about it.
Wonderful. So I'm going to ask you, tell me your first memory once you were introduced to this work of unwinding, and sort of, what was it like for you, and everything behind that emotionally, and the mysticism of it, and that sort of thing. Just kind of a brief intro.
Yeah, sure. I had no idea, like zero idea about unwinding, what it was, anything about it. And during that first class, there was a lot of, as Cindy said before, we all were just taking the unwinding class, and we were repeating the class. And that's very common with this work, is that as therapists, we repeat the classes to just get a better understanding, a deeper understanding. So there was a lot of clinicians at that MFR 1 that were repeating. So it wasn't all new therapists like to the work as I was. And, when we're in the class, John or the instructor will show a technique, they demonstrate it, and then we work on each other. And right from probably one of the first techniques that we were partnering with, it was a big class, probably 100 people. There were people in the class unwinding and, spontaneously moving and making noises and crying. And I didn't know what was happening and what was going on. It was definitely a different experience for me coming from a traditional PT world. But again, just being in the class for that day, and then as the seminar went on for the next couple of days, it was just, it became natural. I wound up unwinding in that first class, and just realized that it's so important to get in touch with these movements and emotions and different things that we hold in our body, that when we can take our brakes off and trust, they're able to express themselves.
Okay, awesome. Very, very nice. And I love how you put in there the emotions and the movement, right? So we're really trying to focus my next several podcasts and really from here on out, really trying to educate people on how emotions are stored in the body. And this is really the hallmark, I think, and the difference with the John Barnes myofascial release approach is that he's always honored that from the beginning. And we, you know, especially in physical therapy and in medicine, it's kind of been like, well, we don't talk about this, and you know, there's emotions. And when I would treat patients in a traditional setting, and you know, a hospital type outpatient, and you have hands on someone and they're just from the inside, emotion can erupt and they begin to cry. They feel like, oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I don't know why I'm getting emotional, right? And it's just a natural thing that we've been, I think, not necessarily taught, but because we didn't understand it, it's resulted in us learning how to suppress that. So big part of it. So thank you for sharing that. And Craig, tell us a little bit about you. First of all, where you are and how you came to do this type of work, not just John Barnes, but that you're a massage therapist. So let's know.
That's right. It's great to be here with you both. And it feels it was just recently, wasn't it, that we were at Unwinding seminar with John and the experts and all our crew and tribe in the Verde Valley. So I'm a massage therapist. I'm a massage tutor as well. I started my journey 20 years ago as a therapeutic massage practitioner, and then was asked back as an assistant tutor, which I jumped at the chance to do, and then later nudged into becoming a massage tutor. And around that time, actually, I met my good friend and colleague now, Sally Morris, and we were both kind of new about myofascial release as part of kind of soft tissue therapy, and there was some courses available in the UK, but so I'd done a little bit of it. But then the kicker was that Sally, we worked together at Glastonbury Festival. So we worked doing some little massage teams at some festivals, and loved music. So Sally came back from, I think, if they got this right, it's the full first series. And before we started the days kind of working, massaging with the folk coming through, it's crew and artists that we work with, she said, look, check this out. You need to sort of feel this. And so I think the first morning we went in for half an hour, and there was some little murmurs. I was kind of curious, and we agreed to come in the next morning before work again. And I remember the phrase, and I was kind of neutral. I'd not got any sort of expectation, but I knew if Sally was saying, look, you need to check this out, I was very curious. And I'd heard, like I said, I'm not sure I'd heard about unwinding. This was interesting. So then within, a few minutes of starting this second treatment, my body started to move of its own volition. And then that kind of, Sally held that, encouraged me to sort of take my brakes off and go with that. And then I had emotional release. My body kept moving, was moving in all directions. And from that moment, I absolutely knew that this was authentic work. This was coming from my body. It was being skillfully, even at that stage, facilitated by Sally's hands and presence. And so that was it. So my closest contact to learning more about this was via Sally. So I knew to stay close to that. She came back from, I think, some more seminars. So I'm like, work on me, you know, what's been happening there, you know, because I knew to get as close to the source to this fantastic work as I could. So I was quite unashamed about trying to pinch as much as I could. And I was starting to kind of integrate a little bit into my massage practice, and then was unwinding more and going through that kind of process. And then I think it took me, I think that was about 2015. We worked it out just the other day. And it took, I think it was around that time. And then I think it was maybe about 2019. I managed to get over. I knew I had to get over and get to the States and meet John and get into the first. I did the full series of seminars, and I hit the ground running in some ways because I was unwinding. I was in that kind of process. So that was, well, as we'll discuss, this stuff goes deep, right? But it was kind of familiar. And there's a couple of Brits over there, 2 or 3 Brits over there, as well. So I got to meet some new people, and that that was the full series. So it was wow, what an experience, you know, just to sort of really go deeper into that, and knowing that this was going to be initially a part of my practice. Absolutely so. And then I think that was, I come back actually, yes, I came back just to sort of round this off in my progression of where I went with MFR, because I came back and did fascial pelvis with Mickey, and then traveled over to do SES. And what was wild about that was this is as the pandemic was unfolding. And so this was all happening in the background. I actually worked with John and the team in Therapy on the Rocks the last week that the clinic was open. And so was revved up to kind of take MFR back more into my practice. Managed to get back to the UK, but then we're on hold a little bit. But that was a real transition time as well, because I knew, and it was shortly after that, and John's talked about this, I think, you know, you're integrating MFR into practice, and there'll potentially come a time when you say, okay, I want to do MFR for the full time, you know. And that was the change for me coming out of the pandemic, getting back to work. And I think from around that time, I went full MFR into my therapy practice, and people were searching it out. They're looking for it, you know, by name, and getting recommended, and it transformed my practice. You know, not looked back since, and I've been back a good few times since, and obviously recently you guys to Repeat Unwinding.
Yeah, awesome. So you are in the UK. Obviously, yeah.
Sheffield in the UK. Yes, I'm
Sheffield,
in
okay.
Sheffield in the UK. Actually, but now I'm in Essex at my colleague's place, so I'm down here for a little bit for some work, and then heading back north to Sheffield. Yeah.
So something that we kind of all have in common is, and we see this across other practitioners who are learning this work, is that you get into it maybe briefly at first, and you realize the power and how much people need this work, and then we end up switching our careers to help people. Because I remember that moment when I realized everybody who walks in this door needs this work, because we all are energetic, emotional human beings holding all of this within our physical form, right? And we are not having options of learning how to let it go and to keep us from holding. So I'll just share a little bit about my history. I mean, I've been doing this work for 29 years. I was thankfully introduced in PT school to it, but only for those first 3 years, I was doing it in a very left-brained way. And as John Barnes would say, Channel 5, because I didn't go to courses. I was working on my PhD and being a PT. And so I didn't really have the time or money to go do that. When I finally did, so here I am 3 years, like studying the manuals. I had other therapists show me how to do it who clearly didn't know about unwinding. And although I had had a couple experiences that were kind of odd, I couldn't really explain. And I volunteer to be the subject on the table when John was teaching MFR1. And sure enough, with, you know, put both hands across my diaphragm, the rib cage area, and my back, my body started to go into this movement. And he's explaining to the class, you know, 100 people out there, oh, her eyes are going into nystagmus, which is this movement that happens, this neurological movement. And my breathing was increasing. I was sweating like crazy, just like in a matter of moments. And my body starts to come up off of the table, and I started to cry. Like this emotion was welling up. I didn't have a label for it. I didn't have a visual for it or anything like that. I just could feel this happening. And of course, he's explaining it in front of the group, which made me kind of fall out of it a bit. But I realized, like, kind of like the way you described it, Craig, there's something really going on here that is truly authentic and from within me. So, and throughout the rest of that course, you know, you could see other people doing these things and emotion coming up. And when someone feels safe to be able to express themselves or express whatever they're feeling, and that's what we mean by take the brakes off, like allow that emotion to surface and really go into the cry. And maybe it's not just tears, maybe it's a wail, maybe it's a yell, or maybe anger then starts to surface. The relief of that in our tissues can be profound. So I can remember I only took that one course. I'm curious for you, Rachele, if you took all of them together, sounds like, Craig, if you're going to go that far, and you kind of knew about unwinding already, right? But I didn't take the unwinding course for a while, at like several months, maybe 4 or 5 months, but I was very curious about what this was. And looking back, I think I've taken the course 3 times now, and then of course advanced unwinding. But looking at how I see it as the practitioner I am today, and the patient that I am today, or the person going through it, compared to back then, it's definitely a bit different. So I'd love to get some thoughts from you guys, especially after being there this time. And again, it's great being with John. But would you have anything to comment about that, Rachele? Like just kind of comparing your experience? Yeah, what was it like for you?
Yeah, sure. I've been thinking a lot about that because I've never taken a full series. It hasn't worked out in my life. Like I have 2 small kids, and when I first started my MFR journey, I had one small daughter. So it's just hard to get away for 10 days to take the whole series. So every class I've taken just been the one class, and then take another one at some time. So unwinding was very early in my career. My MFR career, I think it was 2018. So maybe about a year after, or 8 months after I took MFR1, that I did unwinding the first time. Now I'm almost 8 years into doing this work, and to take it again, it was a completely different experience. I mean, yeah, just completely different. You look at the work in a whole new way. You don't just unwind at unwinding class. So like I've been through other unwindings and in seminars and in treatment, when I personally go for treatment. So just to experience this in my body this time around was just very different. It was, you're just more open to it, and there's more to feel and to experience, and there's a lot less fear too, for sure. I think initially unwinding and this thought of your body kind of moving spontaneously on its own, and emotions coming from, you maybe have no idea where they're coming from. Like Cindy, you mentioned you started crying, and I've had that happen too. And you don't always know where it's coming from, and that could be very scary. But I think the more that you trust the work and you trust the practitioner that you're with, it's not as scary. So unwinding this time around, 7 years after taking it the first time, a lot less fear and a lot more ability to just be open and allow for whatever my body needed, whether I knew what was happening or why it was happening or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's good. How about you, Craig?
Sure, yeah. So it's interesting to hear you say that, yeah, of taking a seminar and then gradually building that up, because I think it's a lot more common for us Brits, and whether this is the case for other people internationally, to do a full series, and I've actually had conversations with people in seminars saying, oh wow, and maybe seeing someone MFR Insight about, oh wow, is that intense, to sort of come and do all that at once, and we're traveling a long way, so it's almost like we don't think about it. But even back then, I was able to have obviously conversations with a growing experienced colleague, and realize that that would be the way I'd come to the seminars. I think I've only missed 1 year over the last 6 years. I've been every year to different seminars and done pretty much full series, I think. So I wanted to say, yeah, they sort of hit the ground running in that first series, but the kind of the process now, the getting treatment and learning and being with an experienced therapist who you can, like you said, Rachele, feel safe with, to let go, to go deeper. You're benefiting from their experience of being present and feeling and seeing. And if you get the chance to ask questions about how they're supporting you through that, to then go deeper. So that combination of getting treatment, of taking the plunge into, staying in channel 3, going through periods of being quiet, working with clients, and it not potentially being the kind of vigorous, let's say, experience of being in a seminar, then coming back to your practice and look, this can be a gradual process. And so going through that process of channel 5, telling that to be quiet and stay in channel 3. So it's been a real journey of learning via my own treatment and going deeper into that to then, and interestingly viewing, I think I worked with you, Ray, when the first time I met you, Rachele, actually, I can't remember which seminar, but I kind of looked at myself and recognized the progress I was making, knew there was more to go, but just being comfortable around when you start to unwind and working with that, really sort of could see a little bit of progression, and there's still more, there's still so much more to learn, which is just absolutely fascinating, as I think we can all hold testament to from this last unwinding class we've just been at. And there's some familiarities, we get an inkling of what some of it might be about. Most of the time, I think, not really, and that doesn't matter too much. It's not linear. But then some challenging moments, we're going to be honest about that. There was a few moments, and there's been some recent moments in me making the decision to keep going with this and go deep into the practice. There's been some challenging times, and I know John has said in the past, feel the fear and do it anyway. And I really had to have that phrase with me in a group unwinding in this last seminar, because it was a very challenging experience in the initial part of the unwind. And I just knew I had to kind of feel and go with that and come out the other side. But yeah, challenging, and this is what, I don't know, a good few years in, there's so much to it.
Yeah, agreed. I just want to mention, it's because you brought up a few times channel 3 and channel 5, and I mentioned channel 5. So John, for those who might not know, channel 5 and channel 3 are analogies that he's been using for the 50 years he's been teaching this, to help people understand and to see what we're talking about when we say go inside. So like if you're watching a television and there's one show going on channel 5, one show going on channel 3, you dial into whichever. Channel 5 he's referring to as our intellectual brain, our thinking side, our more, everything's sort of black and white, and it's where we have to live. It's our society. It's this intellectual headspace, I think of it. And channel 3 is the inner space, the intuition, our knowingness, our being present, and following that and being here now, and not trying to figure stuff out, but trying to experience things and feeling. So the more we as practitioners can be in channel 3 or connecting more with channel 3, and as patients, then we can go into this space of stored emotion and trauma and different things that our body has experienced, and maybe be able to then let go of some things that are stored there, because we're not really taught that. I mean, we're taught from a very young age how to be in channel 5 and stay in channel 5. And I think of young children as they go to school very little, they're like taught, okay, you basically turn off your body signals, because you go to the bathroom when we tell you it's time to use the restroom, or you get a drink and you eat when you're supposed to, right? And so we don't do those things by feeling. So we learn how to not pay attention to the small signals in our body, including the emotional ones, right? So when I think about how do we describe unwinding to those who don't know what we're talking about, and they're hearing words like, well, your body just starts moving and emotion is coming up. Well, what does that look like, and what does that mean? It's very hard to be able to share without experiencing it. But if you could imagine as therapists, someone, as they're getting treatment, it may have some emotion come up. But when we talk about movement, let me give you an example that happened to me the first time I went to Sedona to be treated. And this was over 20 years ago. So sometime between 23 and 25 years ago was my first real unwinding. And, it was really out of the blue. And so, of course, there was that time with the session that I mentioned, but actually being treated. So one of the profound ones, I was in Sedona, and I was being treated. and my body started to move, and it started to move up quite significantly, kind of off of the table in a way. So the therapist is there, and I had taken courses, so I knew that I could trust them and that they knew how to handle this type of movement. And so she was there to brace me, and it wasn't a problem. I didn't actually fall off the table or anything, but there was a moment where then I was still kind of sort of half on the table, half in the air, and she's supporting me as needed. And then that softened, and I had this memory pop in my head of when I was about 4 years old on the swing set in my backyard. I had practiced all day learning how to hang from my knees. You're hanging on and your knees are over, and then you let your arms go. And I had learned how to do it, and I was all proud of myself. And my dad came out of the garage, and I wanted to tell him, hey, Daddy, look what I can do. And I did that. Well, I flipped over off of the thing and landed on my face. And the next thing I remember, I was in the ER. So that whole memory came to the surface as I'm being treated on the table, and my body is kind of in the air. And then which we would call a still point, and then it softened, and I was able to release that, and tears came up in the whole bit. And I was like, wow, that's what that means. Now, you don't always have a memory surface like that. And John talks about sometimes we need that memory in your body. If you do, your body will let you know and it will show you. Other times we don't. I would say most of the times I don't have a memory like that surface, but that stuck energy in my body, in my physiology, in my cells flowing through the fascia was released through that experience. And I'm grateful that I was shown what it was so I could really understand. And so as therapists, when we go to this unwinding course, not only are we getting treated because we're helping each other, but we're learning how to support our patient or client in case they start to have this movement on the table. And so we can encourage them. And we're not unwinding people. We're not doing things to them to make this come out. It's, can you get into a space of channel 3 and calm enough and trust to be able to allow yourself to feel, and then allow that to surface so that you can release that and let that go and let go of what's no longer serving you. So with that being said, would either one of you like to add to that or clarify or share?
Go, Rachel.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you said, and how you speak about channel 3 and channel 5. I think it's a great description. Other thing John loves to say is channel 3 is love. And I think that's so important, that's when we're coming from a place of channel 3, we're really coming from a place of love. And I try to remind myself that often when I'm with my patients and I have my hands on them, to open my heart and just to send love through my hands, and hope that they feel that so that they can soften and they can trust and they can allow for whatever needs to happen. You mentioned a memory coming up, and when I have unwound in the past, I don't often get memories that come up. Like it's not. Yeah, I don't always know why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling or why my body's moving. And I've talked to so many MFR therapists at this point that do have memories come up, or they know exactly why their body is moving the way it's moving, or why they're crying, or why they're feeling angry, or whatever the emotion is. And that really doesn't always happen to me. I often want to be able to connect it to something, but I've learned to just trust my body, and to allow for whatever it needs to do. And often I don't know why I'm moving the way I'm moving, or the making a sound or whatever, or crying or whatever's coming up. But it's not, I think for patients, it's when they're on our tables, like you said, Cindy, it's such a hard concept to explain. And I think, society has taught us not to express our emotions. I mean, I often will talk about, just when I'm trying to explain this to a patient and what it means to be in channel 3. I'll often just talk about, thinking about a baby, an infant, or a little child that hasn't gone to school yet, that is they're just so in the moment. You know, if they're hungry, if they're an infant, they're crying. And if well, crying but is everything when they're an infant, right? Whether they're hungry or they need to be changed or they're unhappy, but whatever it is, they're expressing themselves. They find a way to express themselves, and no one's telling them to hold it back. And you don't get upset as a parent or an adult if a baby is crying. You understand that they need to express themselves in that way. And the same with little children too. You know, currently I have a 10-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I mean, they both, they both probably hold back some of their emotions sometimes, but especially the 4-year-old, he is very, he just throws tantrums sometimes. But it's because he knows what he needs, and he expresses himself, and he doesn't mind if he's crying, and nobody's yelling at him. And as adults, we forget that. We forget that you can't be a blubbering mess if you're in the supermarket, but you can you can acknowledge it to your body if something starts to come up, and then take care of it later and allow yourself to feel those emotions later. But nobody tells us this. Nobody teaches us this. And I think MFR does. And, the way John teaches it teaches us that you can express your emotions. You need to get in touch with what you're feeling inside and allow it to be expressed when you're in a safe place to be able to do it. Whether you learn how to do it on your own, which is one of the things, we teach our patients and clients, or we learn at seminars, or when you're with an experienced practitioner that can guide you, it's just so important. It really is. It's life-saving, I think.
Absolutely.
Yes, I reminded me of the layers and depth of this stuff, and again, going back to that kind of really pivotal first series I attended, and that learning that we were actually in the unwinding seminar, so there's a lot of unwinding going on, and that's the focus. I remember the lights down being low, and I was treating. I think I was working with someone on the floor, and I was still unwinding. I was treating, but my body was still kind of unwinding. So, and I think this got mentioned in a question in the recent unwinding seminar, if I remember correctly, about that kind of, what happens if that's the case. And I think John said, it's good, feel that it's a two-way street. Obviously, you work more to kind of not let that get in the way of you being the sort of therapist, but it's a good thing to have that kind of resonance. And I remember that early on, and that was just kind of, we laughed about it afterwards, but, because we had a quick check-in after that happened. And yeah, I remember that first seminar, and another guy said to me, we had a group unwind, and the vibration and energy that was moving through me was just incredible. I still get elements of that now and feel that resonance, but I remember it being in that kind of little bit of a pressure cooker of that first series. And it was a big group, and I think that, there is always an energy in there, but it was palpable this time. Things were coming up in some treatments. John was sharing a bit of advanced information, which even then I was kind of like really paying attention to, and said to a colleague, "Oh, there's lots of information that John's sharing here." But that was a memory I had of that early experience of that being an ongoing process. And I've been in a supermarket and my hip started unwinding. So I pretended to walk up and down the aisles to look for things that I didn't really need while that just settled down a little bit. I actually phoned my colleague, Sally, and said, "I'm unwinding in a supermarket." And she laughed and said, "Fantastic. That's great." And I knew it was kind of okay, but it's just hilarious. And it wasn't a stuff, traumatic or anything, but it was just my body was something to do that. So this can kind of happen. And this is the thing, isn't it, about just working with a client of the day, letting them know it was a first treatment with them, and they were straight in there. Their body was moving. They chuckled a little bit. They laughed. They were kind of aware of themselves moving. And I said, "That's understandable. Go with it. Keep that going. Let that come up." And then let them know that, this can resonate on for a good few hours potentially, you might feel energized, you might feel a little bit whacked out. So take care of yourself and enjoy and welcome to that kind of process of what your body's capable of doing.
Yeah, that's a good point, Craig. And I know I can remember John saying, you know, reminding us, don't always ask people how they feel right after treatment. You may have stirred them up. It's okay to be stirred up a little bit. And to trust that process. And it does continue to go on. And we can also learn to get into this space ourselves and with self-treatment and allow unwinding from within, even without a therapist there, right? So John talks about self-treatment and how important it is. And I know it was a godsend for me, because 25 years ago when I needed this work severely and there was nobody around me to treat me, so I had to go to courses or travel to get treatment states away. But you know, I think that's what's different for me now, looking at how is unwinding, like taking this class with beginner's mind as much as possible, right? Trying to go into these courses fresh, but yet we still have this experience. There's definitely no more fear about what the process is, right? It's like there's full understanding and trust and knowing and not getting caught up with not getting a visual or not knowing where it's coming from. Like you said, Rachele, you don't often feel that, and it's totally fine, and trusting that process of feeling. And you know, it reminds me, you mentioned that John talks about channel 3 being love, and it's so true. At that first seminar I went to, you know, physical therapy, we don't talk about stuff like that. Like, you know, this is all in fact, it's even more so now because of the way the education process has changed. And it's all very clinical. It's all very outcome-based studies. And, you know, everybody's very left brain and all of that. But he said, it all comes back to love. And I will never forget, like, the whole scene and how I felt about everything when he said that, and how that really resonated with me, because it really is so true. And we've gotten so far from that, I think. And I still, you know, being a PT, and, you know, this is what people want. They want to hear, okay, I want to be fixed, or I want this pain to go away, or what have you. But so in trying to educate them in this process, and we do want people's pain to go away, we do want them to have improved function, but now sharing, this is why it's become important for me to say a lot more about emotions in the body. And then this whole idea of it coming back to love is so important, because we're not doing it for ourselves. I mean, that was my biggest hurdle, was learning to love myself more. I think I see this from people a lot. You know, it's like how we can come to our own space with self-treatment and self-care and self-love, to be able to know that it's all okay, and we can be present in this space. And so, yeah, it's definitely a way of life, right?
Yes, 100%.
Absolutely.
Any other thoughts about that for the moment? You guys have surfacing, or anything else even similar?
One of the things I'm just to come back thinking about channel 3 and channel 5, I remember for a while being, not surprisingly, one or the other about that, but the more accurate description seems to be that our natural state is being in channel 3, to be in intuitive centered connectors, in that vibration of love. And whereas channel 5 is that kind of, ironically, runs the show most of the time, but is that element of that, the intellectual cognitive side, super important, but is this element, whereas the broader, our whole of being seems to be this kind of channel 3 state. And I like that. It seems to make more sense.
Absolutely. I think this whole the channel 5 and channel 3 thing makes it easier, but I often think, wow, can you imagine what it was like? And we struggle now talking about energy and frequency and these things in our day and age, what it was like for John to do this, you know, 45, 50 years ago. Like, what a pioneer, right? And to stick true to all of that.
Yeah, I think of that often. I mean, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and, you know, usually health related, biohacking, just all about, staying healthy and living a better life. And there's a lot of people talking about these types of things, not MFR in particular. I wish there was more talk about John Barnes and MFR, but just a lot of people talking about energy and healthy lifestyle and ways to talking about how our bodies do have an innate ability to heal. We don't always need the pill. We don't always need the surgery. We might, and thank God that there's things out there, but that shouldn't be our first line of defense. And I think so much, especially since the pandemic, there's been a lot more talk about that, and a lot more people talking about it. But it's still a sliver of the medical community, unfortunately. And I often think about that. My goodness, like John was talking about this, 50 years ago, and he persevered and he continued to just know his truth and know what was helping him and helping his patients. And, being told, well, where's the research? And he said, well, what do I need the research for? I'm living it. I'm watching these people get better. And I think, finally today we do have some good research that backs up the things that John talks about and the things that we do in MFR. And I'm very happy that it's there. But in the end, it is about that our bodies can heal. We have to give them the right environment. And MFR is so crucial to giving your body the right environment to allow for this authentic healing that it knows what to do when it's in the right place. And that's to me what MFR is too, is it's just it gives your body like a reset and allows it to all the functions that the body does can happen better when our fascia is open and clear, and we allow for some of it doesn't have to be unwinding all the time, obviously, but just we're getting this work on a regular basis. It's so important.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. That kind of the slings and arrows that John went through to to stick to his guns, so to speak, and keep going with this and hone it into a depth of skill that is just quite incredible. The dynamic of supporting that unwinding process, spotting that came up in the seminar we're in recently, becoming skilled in spotting still points and helping people sort of feel and be in that space, supporting them through the movement of positions in space, is that dynamic process. And it can be up, down, sideways, but also as well, it reminds me that also some of the most profound unwinds can be there won't be a lot of visual movement. It's an internal process. And I remember a couple of years ago, a very still session. There was a sense that yes, the client was in their body, and I worked in a few different areas, stayed with them, and it was their first experience of John Barnes' approach to MFR, and they sat up and looked at me and said there was a lot going on in there. They really did connect in, and their body was doing what it needed to do. And again, all these kind of experiences as a therapist, and even receiving, and perhaps your body being quiet, for a time in some, not just structural work, but even sort of quiet moments in treatment. There's still, if you're connected and, you're 50-50 in treatment and you're letting go and you're present, it's not linear. Your body's, taking what it needs. And so as a therapist, thinking about people who might be listening here, either patients thinking about trying out MFR, or therapists thinking about doing more MFR and training more, that process and that skill is like, that's that double loop of experience of receiving treatment yourself, feeling that, letting go in with your own treatment, but then having that, sticking with it and having that experience that there can be that variety in people's unwindings and connection. Really important.
Absolutely. Yeah. Wonderful work. And I know we all feel so grateful to be able to have come across this. I every day feel like what a gift, and can't imagine my life without having had this in my life. Right.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Once you've felt it, and that's the thing to say to people potentially listening as well, is that it is a feeling. It's absolutely a feeling. We can talk about our experience, which is really useful. And I can imagine myself tuning into this conversation and taking as many notes as possible as a beginner, perhaps. But also as you know, with a little experience. But that importance of feeling that, letting go, being with a therapist. This is important to track down and be with a therapist that's got some experience you can feel safe with, to let go, and what that feels like, and being patient with yourself. I've worked with clients that's been such a slow process of them peeling back the layers to feel comfortable, to let go, asking me if they're doing it right. I said, look, yes, we're connected, we're here, we're present. If your body's been stuck for a long time, it may take a long time for that to kind of to resonate and move more physically, and stick with that, and made some great progression just on a slow trajectory. So that was a learn for me from sticking with that process, and if in doubt, go deep into channel 3 and stay with it. John teaches us.
Feeling is healing, right?
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
100%.
And repeating courses is incredible, because we show up every time we show up. We're a different person showing up to that experience, and it's really been great.
So important. Learned so much from repeating this first series. New kind of guests that I would, and meeting you, Cindy. Finally, we've chatted online a few times. That was amazing, and being with. Seeing some old faces new, and just hearing again people's stories of the light bulbs going on in their mind and body connection, sharing their incredible stories of coming home to their bodies, was just, again, all inspiring, and yeah, 100% makes me feel, and I think you're the same, that we're on the right track with this work.
Absolutely. And I will just, I'll share here. So initially we had a fourth person who was going to join us, and she will be. So we will be coming back and either adding to this or doing it again. And I think all of us were really touched by her story. And this is another thing that, like, had I not repeated that seminar, I wouldn't have heard that story, which has been of value to me. And this is how this network of energy intertwines. It's just really, really amazing. So I look forward to, we look forward to coming back and sharing a little bit more, and diving deeper into some therapist discussions, and hopefully shedding some light on what Channel 3 is, what John Barnes Myofascial Release is, and how you can go deeper and get more out of life and experience more love, basically.
Brilliant. Look forward to it.
Yes, same. Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you.
Great to see you.
Great to see you guys.